Okay, if we can get just one more member to turn on the screen, then we'll have a quorum and we can get started. Great, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Committee on Veterans and Legal Affairs. Apologies for the IT issues that we've had this morning. For some reason, this meeting was set up requiring a passcode, which is unfortunate. So, but I think we've sent it to everybody. So today we're assembled electronically for the purposes of inviting public comment on legislation that is pending before us. Before we get started, we'll have the committee members introduce themselves. We'll begin with the House Chairman, Chiazzo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for your patience. Chris Chiazzo, House District 28, West Scarborough.
Okay, Representative Riley.
Representative Riley, I represent House District 34, which is part of Westbrook.
Representative Kinney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm Mary Ann Kinney. I represent House District 99, towns of Brooks, Burnham, Freedom, Jackson, Knox, Monroe, Thorndike, Troy, and Unity in Waldo County.
Representative Corey.
Good morning. I'm Patrick Corey. I represent House District 25, which is part of Wyndham.
Representative McCrate.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Jay McCrate, representing Harpswell, West Bath, and Northeast Brunswick in the House.
Okay, Representative Dolliff.
Good morning, Representative Josephine Dolliff, representing District 115 in the Western Mountains.
Okay, Representative Supika.
Good morning, I'm Laura Supika, and I represent District 126, which is a portion of Bangor.
And Representative Wood.
Good morning, I'm Barb Wood, and I represent House District 38, which is the West End and St. John Valley area in Portland.
Great, and my name's Louis Lucchini. I represent most of Hancock County in the State Senate. Before we get started, we'll go over just a few of the ground rules and procedures for electronic committee meetings. So just so everybody knows, we're currently streaming this meeting on the legislature's YouTube channel. So that means anybody who's a participant in the meeting by Zoom can be seen and also heard if their microphone is unmuted. People on the Zoom meeting who are in the meeting waiting to testify, you won't be seen or heard until you're called upon to speak. We'll bring you into the meeting. It's important to note, as we bring you into the panel, it may look like you're being dropped for a second as we move you up here, but just be patient. It takes a couple seconds, and once here, you'll be able to turn on your screen and unmute yourself, and we'll be able to submit testimony. As always, the audio for this meeting is also being live streamed online at the legislature's website. And if you've submitted written testimony today, that will also be publicly posted on the legislature's website. Regarding the chat function of the Zoom meeting, this is for technical assistance only. It's not a place to conduct any work. And if committee members would like to ask any clarifying questions to somebody who's testifying, please raise your virtual hand and we'll call on you. Otherwise, we'll save committee discussion for a work session. So for our bills today, we'll follow the usual procedure of beginning with sponsors, followed by co-sponsors, followed by those who've registered to testify today. And we try to do to the best of our ability, just like in the committee room, we go through those in favor, followed by those in opposition, and lastly, those who are neither for nor against. For members of the public, when you're called, please remember to state your name, your place of residence, and the organization you represent, if any. And only remarks on legislation before us are considered in order. And another reminder that testimony on bills is limited to 3 minutes, so please tailor your remarks accordingly. When you get close to the 3-minute limit, the House Chair, Chairman Chiazzo, will hold up a clock so that you can see where the time is. So just so everybody knows the order that we're going to move in today, we're going to kind of do the bills by topic subject matter. We're going to start with the Ethics Commission bills, which will be LD 1754 and LD 1779. And then we're going to move to election bills, which is LD. I'm sorry. So we're going to start with 1754, then 1782. Then we're going to move to elections, which is 1779, 1821, and 1830. So we'll try to move in topics as best as possible. With that, I will turn it over to the House Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everybody. We're going to kick off the public hearing for LD 1754, which is an act to modify the reporting requirements for major contributors to ballot questions and campaigns. We'll start off with Bill's sponsor, which is Senator Lucchini. So when you are ready, sir, you have the floor.
Great. Thank you, Chairman Chiazzo and members of the committee. My name's Louis Lucchini. I represent most of Hancock County in the state Senate, and I'm here to present LD 1754, an act to modify the reporting requirements for major contributors to ballot question campaigns. As the bill jacket says, this is a department bill submitted by the Commission on Governmental Ethics and Election Practices. The bill does a few different things, which Director Wayne will be able to explain far better than I can, but the first thing that it does is exempt, as I should say, this is related to that major contributor requirement, where if somebody is to give over $100,000 to a ballot question to influence, to a BQC, ballot question committee, to influence a question, that they need to disclose their donors. So this would allow an exemption for PACs that are already registered with the commission, because we see much more than their largest donors. We see all of them. It also allows a major contributor to request a modification of the requirement, and it clarifies the enforcement provisions to make it clearer for those filing as well as the commission. So with that, I'll conclude and take any questions.
Thank you, Senator Lucchini. Any questions for the senator? Okay, seeing none. Thank you for kicking us off. We'll bring in Director Wayne from the Ethics Commission, and I think you, sir, are good to go. Whenever you're ready, sir.
All right, thank you very much. Good morning, committee members. I'm Jonathan Wayne, the Executive Director of the State Ethics Commission, and this is an agency bill, and it's to make some modest changes, as Senator Lucchini said, to this major contributor report. And I don't have that much more to say than Senator Lucchini's summary just now, but I'll just run through it real quickly. This report is a one-time statement that's filed with our office by an organization that has contributed more than $100,000 to a PAC or a ballot question committee to influence a ballot question election. And in that one-time report, the organization that files this with us, they're filing as a contributor. They're saying we've given more than $100,000 to a PAC or ballot question committee, and they're required to provide to us a responsible officer and a statement of the form of their organization, whether they're registered with other states, information like that about them. And one of the items in the statement is that they're required to disclose the 5 largest sources of their funding for the past 6 months prior to when they donated this $100,000 to a PAC or ballot question committee. So our bill would like to do 3 things. First, we think if the organization giving the $100,000 is already registered with us as a PAC or a ballot question committee, there's really no need for them to file this one-time report as a major contributor. So we would like to exempt PACs and BQCs from having to file this report. So that's the first item. The second item is that in administering this reporting requirement, what we found is that with respect to the New England Clean Energy Corridor project, we were approached by large companies, energy companies, who were donating money to PACs and ballot question committees on both sides of the issue. And they said, look, we are major commercial enterprises with lots and lots of divisions, and it would just take us a lot of time and staff resources to have to identify the customers and the investors across our divisions who have provided us with the 5 largest sources of our funds in the past 6 months. And so what we are proposing in this law, after talking to our council, we had some we appreciated that was a burden, and we reached an accommodation with them. And so what we're proposing going forward is that if a major contributor, like a commercial business, found that this was very burdensome and difficult for them to comply with, they could ask for a modification to this based on the amount of staff resources and the public interest and that kind of thing. So that was our proposal. And then in the course of preparing this testimony, I was contacted by some of the government reform groups that care about these kinds of disclosure laws. And I think you may hear from one representative of them later on, and said that a much simpler way to do this would be just to create an additional exception for revenue received from a commercial entity in the course of conducting its ordinary business. So in other words, if there's a large company that contributed to a PAC or a ballot question committee, they wouldn't have to report their regular customers that had given them money for business purposes that was really unrelated to an election, and we'd be very comfortable with that. So we're happy to work with the committee or with the government reform groups on that. And then the final thing that the bill does is simply reformats the enforcement provision in the bill, which is kind of confusing. And the way we're just trying to restructure it so that it's very clear what are the violations that have occurred and could occur in the future, and what are the factors that the commission is supposed to consider if someone has made a mistake and violated these provisions. It's really overall quite a minor bill, but it's technical, and we appreciate your consideration of it. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Director Wayne. Representative Corey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Getting used to Zoom again. Where's the mute button? Where's the button to take down my hand? So I'm trying to understand this. So basically you have sort of a major contributor, right? And they have money that kind of flows into their company, right? And people may have sent that money to the company for other reasons other than to influence the ballot question, and we're asking them to report then on those people that may have sent in money for other reasons other than the ballot question committee. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that, current law requires, that's what's required under current law, and that seems excessive to us. We would like to look at creating an exception for a large business, or really other types of contributors too, but particularly in the case of a large business that has received business income for basically generating electricity or whatever these energy companies do. If they didn't receive it for a political purpose, we don't think there's that much public interest in making them go through the exercise of figuring out exactly how much money they receive from all their customers. It just seems like a very large undertaking. So we'd like to be able to make an exception for them, and really for commercial entities more generally, to have to disclose their 5 largest sources of income.
So if these companies, though, I don't know why it would be hard for a company to disclose their 5 largest sources of income. Personally, I as a legislator have to disclose my 5 largest sources of income, I believe, when I send something in. So it's accounting. It's knowing what's going on in your business and who you're taking money from and everything else. So I get that corporations probably don't want to do this, but could these corporations also be taking money from somebody as part of a campaign, and then putting it forth sort of in the corporation's name and everything else? Or would that separate entity be required to actually contribute to the ballot question committee then, as opposed to just giving the money to a company and then having the company use it for a political purpose? Would any money given for a political purpose still be required to go through the necessary, do you know what I mean, disclosure?
Yes. If one of the purposes of this major contributor report is to kind of ferret out what are the policy organizations or any kind of organization that is actually receiving money for purposes of influencing a ballot question election. If any organization receives more than $5,000 to influence a ballot question, they're supposed to actually be ballot question committee under current law. So this major contributor report really is only supposed to be, in the first place, is only supposed to be for organizations that are that already have their own money from some source, and they're just donating it. If they're actually receiving money for political purposes, they should actually be on record with us as a PAC or ballot question committee and not filing this report. But if the way the report works, if this commercial business did receive money to influence a ballot question election, and the way we're proposing to modify it, they would have to actually disclose that contributor in the major contributor report. They wouldn't be allowed to just hide it. But of course, like with anything else relating to campaign finance reporting, there's an element of, I'm sorry, I'm blanking out on the phrase, but sort of, it's an honest, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the phrase. It's an honesty system. You know, I mean, we do have enforcement powers, but we do rely on people to self-disclose. So there's always a risk that people are, I mean, with anything, any aspect of what the kinds of financial reports we receive, there's always a risk that someone is hiding something somewhere.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Representative Corey. Representative Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Wayne, I'm just trying to get back into the swing of things. Does this apply to an individual? If an individual gave more than $100,000, would they have to disclose?
No, actually, the way major contributor is defined in statute, it says major contributor means a person other than an individual.
Okay.
So they're not covered by this.
Okay.
It's really intended more for organizations.
Okay.
And
to your point, it's a self-disclosure thing as far as what somebody may have given the organization money for. And it's that way currently. So this doesn't really change that.
Right. I mean, no, there's always an element of trust in campaign finance reporting. And unless often we get reports from candidates, parties, PACs, BQCs, and now we get this one-time report from the major contributors. And we, we do some auditing to look under the hood, but basically there's an element of trust and people's fear of, and I hate to use that word, but people are worried about getting in trouble. I mean, a lot of people aren't ashamed to disclose where they get their money and how they spend their money. They understand that's part of contemporary politics. So they just file the reports, and they are genuinely worried if they were to break the law, it could come out. And that's an element of it too. So it's not entirely a trust system, but there's that element in everything we do. Yeah.
Mr. Chair, if I can just ask one more question. And this isn't just a blank slate. They have to ask for this, and the Ethics Commission would do due diligence to determine whether they think in this case, in that particular case, it's okay to bypass that.
Correct. This is first of all, they would still have to file the report. The entire report disclosing all sorts of things about themselves. It's really just this one piece that they could ask for an exception for. And we anticipate that this would be done in public. This would not be a decision by the commission staff that was made privately on our office. We would bring this to the commission. And the way we envisioned it and wrote it up, it was sort of a balancing test where we're directed to consider the financial and staffing resources of the major contributor, the financial cost and amount of time it would take for them to gather the information, and the public interest in having access to the information. And that decision would be made by the commissioners in public at a public meeting, and they would decide whether to basically reach an accommodation or make an exception. Like I said, there was another proposal that was floated to us that we are okay with, which was, I think, designed not to put us into this position of having to decide whether or not to make an exception. And that was just the idea that's in the footnote of my testimony, is that we would just create a sort of universal exception for commercial entities, that it would be written into law. There would just be a general exception for revenue received by a commercial entity in the course of conducting its ordinary business. And we're flexible. That's something that we could be fine with too. In which case there would be no waiver process or no application. We would just not see that information. So that's an alternative for the committee. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Wood. Any other questions for Director Wayne? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, sir, for your testimony. I'm going to keep you right in here because I think you're up on the next one also, unless you have to go. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I actually, there was one important piece of my testimony that I neglected to mention, and with the chair's permission, if I could just address that real quickly.
Sure.
I apologize. This relates to something that's not in the bill. And we were, with the committee's permission, we would like to ask for a couple of weeks to draft a committee amendment on a topic that is has some relationship to the original bill, but is actually somewhat different. So if you remember, last year, the legislature enacted an agency bill from us that was designed to equalize the registration that we receive and the campaign finance reports that we receive from ballot question committees. And the bill did a number of different things, but the idea was that ballot question committees that are formed to influence ballot questions should register with us and file campaign finance reports in exactly the same way as PACs do, because under past law, there had been kind of a difference. So this law passed in 2021, and we were planning to implement it. And we went to our IT vendor because this would require us to change the way that ballot question committees use our e-filing system to register with us and file campaign finance reports. And we said to our e-filing vendor, how much is this going to cost? Just to make BQCs essentially the same as PACs in terms of what they report to us. And our IT vendor told us that the cost would be over $100,000. So we questioned that amount. We sought to reduce the cost, and it's still going to be unacceptably high. So we continue to think that organizations that are raising or spending more than $5,000 to influence a ballot question ought to register and file reports with us in exactly the same way as PACs. But our current thinking is that we need to ask for a law change. And this isn't the only option, but this is our current thinking, where the campaign finance law would keep ballot question committees as a type of committee. It would be a terminal, it would still be a category in the law that would require organizations to register with us and file reports, but that the ballot question committee category would be a subtype of political action committee. So right now in law, ballot question committees are like a separate, very similar to, but a separate category of reporting entity to PACs, but we'd like to bring them to become like a subtype of what is a PAC. And that we think would help us implement our objective with a very modest cost. And it might cause a little confusion, but we hope it would be manageable. So we'd like to explore this in the next, if you'd permit us, the next week or two, and then we could come back to you with an actual statutory proposal with language to see if it met with your approval or not. And we were hoping to use this law as a way to propose this to the legislature and to this committee. Thank you.
Sorry, and my apologies, Director Wayne. I forgot to mention that in my presentation, but I think it's a good option. So sorry about that.
Yeah, and I'm sure we can address it also in work session when it comes up, when we talk about the details and stuff that come through. I assume that language will be available before work session of what you're going to propose.
If you can, we could have it ready 2 weeks from today.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. Representative Dahl.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Director, I just have one quick question. Would this bill ease up some requirements for people or companies, businesses?
I think it would ease. I mean, it's a slight easing up. It is, Representative. So if there's a business that decides it cares a lot about a ballot question committee and it donates more than $100,000 to a ballot question committee, under current law, it is required to file one of these major contributor reports with us. And one of the elements in the report is that they have to disclose the 5 sources that provided them the most funding in the past 6 months. And I think, that can be I heard what Representative Corey is saying, but in the case of a large company, it could be burdensome for them to have to calculate all that. So it would make their lives easier in that circumstance. But it's not a huge thing overall in the, in the context of campaign finance reporting, where we require so much disclosure from so many folks involved in the political process. But it would make the lives of some commercial businesses a little bit easier if this law were enacted. Yes.
Thank you.
Representative Corey. Thank you, Representative Dalla. Representative Corey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm wondering if the businesses want to do this for other reasons or not want to disclose this information for other reasons. I know, as again, a legislator, right, that has to file ethics with ethics, my sources of income and everything else, my concern has always been, giving away who my 5 biggest sources, do you know what I mean, of income are, which I kind of feel is a trade secret, especially for a self-employed, do you know what I mean, person, not just filing, do you know what I mean, sort of as a company and everything else. I mean, I think it's, easy to say this is burdensome, right? For me, when I do it, I download a spreadsheet out of my, my software, do you know what I mean, that I use. I sort that spreadsheet, based on, names, and then, it becomes pretty quickly, do you know what I mean, sort of obvious who my 5 biggest, contributors are. And that's just a couple of quick sorts on a spreadsheet. Now, I know that a lot of companies are much larger than that, but, they have accounting departments. I don't even have an accounting department, and I'm able to, do this. I mean, have any of them mentioned other reasons for not wanting to do this, or just that it's burdensome to figure out who your 5 biggest, I mean, your sales department could probably tell you who your 5 biggest, contributors are for your company, but I don't know. Have they mentioned anything else?
Thank you for the question, Representative. I wasn't myself part of all the conversations. I think I think this is not going to come up with as much frequency as happened with the New England Clean Energy Corridor, where there were commercial businesses that were so interested in the outcome. A lot of times these major contributors are going to be political organizations, advocacy organizations. I think that so I wasn't part of the conversations. I'm sorry, Representative, I don't really know. I'm sort of outlining the first conversation that we received and were in, and we described it to our former counsel, and she said, look, there's, these are customers or investors that are giving money not because they have any intention at all of participating in politics or policy making. They're just, buying energy or whatever they're doing. And so there are limits, she said, to what the state can do to try to get those names into what's essentially a campaign finance report. And so I hear what you're saying, and I have a lot of sympathy for you, Representative, because we counsel all sorts of legislators on having to disclose this information in their annual statements. I know that's our job, and so I feel bad asking people to do these things sometimes, but it's not quite it's a little bit of a different situation, but I hear where you're coming from, and there could be other reasons. There could be other reasons they don't want to identify these 5 largest sources. I don't know.
Thank you, Representative Corey. Representative Sapika.
Thank you. I don't know if this is a question for now or later, but I was just curious when this modification, when was this law created, or has it always just been this way?
So we've been administering it for 3 years. This was a bill from Senator Louis Lucchini, and it was enacted in 2018. So we administered it in 2019, 2020, and 2021. And this is sort of our first, we've had a little experience under our belt now. So this is our first effort at tweaking it.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Sapika. Sorry. Any other questions from the committee for Director Wayne? Representative McCrate.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Director Wayne. Your mention of the alternative around exemption for this, I guess just hearing this and reading the bill, I kind of like the way you have it here. And I just want to say that, but we'll hear more, we'll talk more. So Just my 2 cents at this point. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions for Director Wayne? Representative, nope, sorry. Do you have a question, Representative McCray, or just pushing the buttons? Just pushing the buttons. Okay, gotcha. Anybody else on the committee have any questions for Director Wayne? All right, seeing none, thank you, Director. I'm just going to leave you here in the room if that's okay, because I think you're on the next bill as well. So rather than have you ping pong back and forth. So obviously, feel free to shut your video off or something if you like. Up next, we have John Brodigan. He's speaking in favor of the bill. So if you could, Mr. Brodigan, please name, town you're from, and group, if any, that you are representing. And you will have 3 minutes, sir, and the floor is yours when you're ready.
Good morning, Senator Lucchini, Representative Cayazzo, members of the committee. My name is John Brodigan. I'm a resident of Falmouth. I'm here on behalf of Maine Citizens for Clean Elections. And we're testifying neither for nor against this bill. Apologies that it was entered incorrectly in the when we submitted the testimony. Public awareness of who is spending money to influence our elections is essential to our democracy. But sometimes the people required to make that kind of disclosure resist the transparency, and it can be quite challenging to ensure that the public has this information. And for that reason, MCCE, my organization, wrote one of the nation's first top funder disclosure laws back in this context of the 2015 Citizen Initiative, which this one applies to disclaimers around independent expenditures in candidate races rather than ballot questions. The legislature, as was just described, did move forward with some enhanced disclosure requirements applicable to citizen initiatives and ballot question campaigns in 2018. We think it's important that all requirements like this strike the proper balance between the public need to know and the legitimate interests of the contributors. It's also important that these requirements are clear and definite so that everyone knows exactly what's required, everyone knows how to comply, and commission staff have the sufficient parameters to enforce the law. With time, stakeholders in the commission occasionally identify improvements, and we appreciate that, and we think that this bill is one of them. But we do have some other specific comments relating to the conversation that just occurred. Section 2 of the bill empowers those contributing over $100,000 to request partial waivers that are referred to as modifications. The commission can consider modifying the statutory requirements on the basis of whether the contributor has staffing and other resources, or on whether or not the public interest is served by disclosure of the information. Both of these factors, we think, are policy decisions, but they also have implications for commission staff and entities having to comply. When enacting this statute, the legislature established the relatively high threshold of $100,000 as the point where, in the judgment of the legislature, the public interest outweighs the administrative burden. And I would say maybe experience since then has shown that this is not the right number. It's a little bit hard to say. I don't believe there's any other entity here testifying today about their experience with this. But we think that this bill, the way it's written, may put staff in the position of trying to decide where the public interest lies. And that's a difficult thing to ask them. They're excellent staff, and I don't mean to denigrate them at all. They do a terrific job, but you're asking them to recalibrate a policy determination that's made by the legislature, and I think that's challenging. I'm happy to finish or take any questions or describe the amendment that was referred to earlier that could be proposed here.
Thank you, Mr. Brodigan. I'm looking on the website, and maybe it just didn't refresh. Are you going to provide written testimony as well to the point you brought up, or is that going to be part of the amendment you're going to
I will be providing. If it didn't show up on the website, I will submit it after the hearing. Apologies about that, but yeah, we did intend to submit this in writing.
Okay, yeah, no worries. We're having technical issues all morning, so it wouldn't surprise me if it just hasn't hit the website yet. So thank you for that. Any questions for Mr. Brodigan from the committee? Okay, seeing none, thank you, sir. We look forward to seeing you at the work session for sure. Seeing nobody else registered, either speaking for nor against, neither for nor against, I will check the attendees list. If anybody in the attendee lists would like to speak on this bill, please raise your virtual hand and we will recognize you and bring you into the room. And just a reminder for those watching through YouTube, if you have a link to the meeting, you will need a code to get into the meeting, and the code number is 120954 if you receive the Zoom link and you need the meeting code. So seeing nobody in the attendee room, I will conclude the public hearing for LD 1754. Up next, we have LD 1782, which is an act regarding contributing to candidates and political action committees, sponsored by Senator Lucchini. So we'll open up the public hearing for LD 1782, and I will recognize the bill sponsor, Senator Lucchini.
Thank you, Chairman Chiazzo, members of the Veterans Legal Affairs Committee. My name is Louis Lucchini. I represent most of Hancock County in the State Senate. I'm here to present LD 1782, an act regarding contributing to candidates and political action committees. This was intended to be something of a cleanup bill following the, I think it was chapter law, I was trying to look it up, 274 last session, which dealt with business entities and union contributions. Director Wayne brought this language to me and asked me to submit it. I'm happy to do it to hopefully clean up some of the issues around enforcement and clarify a few issues. So some of the things that it does, as outlined in the summary, it clarifies that a ballot question committee may make contributions to a candidate up to contribution limits, as long as the contributions are not derived from a business entity or union. So this would be putting it at the same level that PACs currently can, or not currently, but will be when this law is in effect, the other laws in effect. It also allows ballot question committees to have the same abilities as PACs in regards to leadership PAC contributions. So again, this kind of puts BQCs and PACs on the same level. In terms of the separate segregated funds, which can donate to candidates, we've added a biennial adjustment, which would have be adjusted based on the CPI, much like candidate contributions. So the amount that somebody can contribute to that will go up, much like it does with candidate contributions. And then it also allows a corporation, membership organization, union, or other organization to contribute staff time of its employees to that separate segregated fund, so that they can help with some of the administrative stuff, perhaps, make sure everything is in order. So again,
apologies, Senator, you cut out there a little bit. If you want to repeat your... Sorry, Senator, you got a bad connection. Yeah, there's a bad connection. If you want to repeat the last couple, you were pretty garbled there. Apologies.
Sorry, it's that kind of morning today. Can you hear me okay now, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, you're good now. You're good now.
Okay, so this would also allow corporations or membership organizations that currently will let their staff help elections, or they can hire bookkeeping assistants, people they can donate that to their to those separate segregated funds. So apologies, I don't know exactly where I cut off, but you know, I think Director Wayne can outline the rationale for this as well, as he provided the language. Sorry about that.
Thank you, Senator. No, I think you picked it up where it was garbled. Any questions for Senator Lucchini? Representative Riley, was that a hand up, or was that just a nervous?
Sorry, no, I just had a scratch. Just had to get it.
Gotcha.
But thank you.
All right, seeing none, thank you, Senator, for introducing the bill. We will recognize Director Wayne again when he's ready. He is obviously speaking in favor of this. So when you're ready, Director, the floor is yours.
Sorry, there we go. Thank you very much, Representative Chiazzo and Senator Lucchini and members of the committee. I'm Jonathan Wayne from the State Ethics Commission, and we appreciate Senator Lucchini's assistance in bringing this forward. This is intended to us to clean up two aspects of a bill that was enacted in 2021, and that was Chapter 274, enacted last year. And the committee will remember this because the bill did a number of things, but one of the features of the bill was that it prohibits corporations and labor unions and nonprofit organizations from donating to candidates for state office and also leadership PACs, among other things. So the bill does not take effect until January 1 of 2023, next year. And we're very grateful to the legislature giving us a year to study this and think through all the policy implications. And as we were studying it last fall, preparing to give guidance on the new restrictions, we discovered a couple of issues that we thought could need to be cleaned up. So one of the issues relates to ballot question committees. These are organizations that are created because they want to raise or spend more than $5,000 to influence a ballot question. And what we found in administering current law is that occasionally these ballot question committees have available funds and they do want to donate to some candidates, even though that's not their primary mission. And so the way Chapter 274 was written seemed to totally disallow that. And so this is really just a modest proposal by us that ballot question committees could donate to candidates in the same way that a political action committee or a political party could. So they would have to abide by the contribution limits, and they couldn't use business entity funds to make those contributions to candidates, but it would be allowed to a limited extent. So we think it solves an ambiguity in our minds about whether or not it was allowed, and we don't really see any reason not to allow it. So that was our proposal in sections 1 and 2 of the bill. The other thing that Chapter 274 did was that it facilitated a particular kind of PAC called a separate segregated fund. So if there were a business or a trade association or a labor union that wanted to influence candidate elections, one of the things that they could do is set up a separate bank account, a separate fund, separate from their regular money. And although they couldn't donate their own corporate money or their own labor organization money directly to the separate fund, they could solicit contributions from individuals into the separate fund and then use that money to donate directly to candidates. And so this idea of a separate segregated fund, I'm not an expert on how other states work, but my understanding is generally that this kind of PAC exists in other states. And so we are it's been set up here to work here as well. So our suggestion in this bill is that if the corporation or the labor organization or nonprofit that is setting up this separate or segregated fund would like to donate some of its own staff time to setting up the fund or raising money for the fund or doing bookkeeping or filing reports with our office, that would be allowed as long as the separate segregated fund, which is a PAC, would report that in-kind assistance. In other words, it seems only reasonable to us, if you're going to let the businesses and the nonprofits set up these separate PACs and raise money for them from individuals, you ought to let them provide some administrative help in doing this. So that seems to be disallowed under the way 274 was originally written, which doesn't seem so practical to us. So we'd like to create an exception to allow for that administrative help and legal help and bookkeeping help to be provided to that separate PAC. And then finally, the revisor's office did add an adjustment to one of the contribution limits in the Chapter 274. Under 274, individuals could donate up to $5,000 per year to these separate segregated funds. And the revisor's office inserted a proposal that that $5,000 limit would be adjusted every 2 years for inflation. And that's also in other parts of our law. It makes sense to us, so we're supportive of that as well. So thank you very much. This really does not fundamentally change what was enacted in 274, which we know there were strong feelings on either side for. We hope to sidestep that whole debate, but we're just trying to make some small cleanups as we look forward to administering this beginning in 2023. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Wayne. Representative Corey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here today, Director Wayne. For me, sort of allowing ballot question committees to give to candidates and political action committees doesn't feel like a modest change. It feels like people gave money for a specific purpose, and then it feels like that money then is being given for another purpose. But I guess it probably, you know, kind of like the other bill, like I'm always kind of interested in sort of motivation with regard to this stuff. So have you been approached by ballot question committees that are requesting this change, or is this something that you sort of came up with on your own?
Now, this is something we came up with on our own. And I have to say, this is not a high stakes decision. We don't know of that many ballot question committees that want to donate to candidates. We were aware of two examples a long time ago when there was one of the citizen initiatives or people's veto referendum to influence the definition of marriage, whether it's anyway, I'll stop right there. And basically the traditional marriage folks not only wanted to influence the ballot question, but then they went on to donate to candidates. And then we knew of another example just in the last 2 years relating to the people's veto referendum on vaccine exemptions. They were supporting, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the history, but it was either an initiative or a referendum relating to vaccine exceptions. That was their primary mission, but they had available funds and they wanted to donate to candidates, and they did so. So we don't see any reason to disallow it, but so, you know, if you disagree with this direction, Representative, this is, like I said, it's not a high stakes thing for us. We just thought it might make sense to have them be treated the same way as PACs. So that was our proposal. But if you strip it from the bill, then they would simply not be allowed to do it going forward.
What is their what are their options for dissolving these funds anyways afterwards? So, you know, the ballot question is over, there's leftover funds. What are their options for getting rid of those funds? Building parks?
It's funny, you know, the law does very specifically regulate leftover candidate funds after an election, but there isn't really any limits on what a PAC or a ballot question committee can do with their funds when they're ready to terminate. They just have to dispose of them some way and then report it, but the law doesn't regulate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Corey. Any other questions for Director Wayne? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, sir, for your time this morning.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome to stick around if you'd like, but otherwise we will certainly see you at the work session. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Up next, we have John Brodigan. Again, he's registered to testify in favor. So again, Mr. Brodigan, we know who you are, but new hearing. So if you would please name town and who you are representing, please, and then you are free to start.
Thank you, Chair Cazzo and Chair Lucchini and members of the VLA committee. My name is John Brodigan. I'm with Maine Citizens for Clean Elections. I know we're running a little bit behind today, so I'll just cut to the main point of our testimony in support of LD 1782. We would just point out that Section 4 of the bill, where the additional text is added to allow additional paid staff time, so allow SSF PACs or SSF committees additional flexibility in the use of staff time and other resources. And we understand the justification for that, and we agree that, you know, this is a useful mechanism for making sure that these committees have their rights to, get involved to a certain extent in campaigns. We would just want to be clear that that needs to be included and reported, that that in-kind contribution to their own SSF should show up somewhere so that the commission and this committee and the public can have some transparency around those in-kind contributions, just to understand whether that is working the way it should, or whether it's becoming something that's very, very large and kind of starting to bump into the purpose of the restriction on corporate contributions in campaigns. So that's the only thing that we would point out, and happy to be here for the work session and take any questions if the committee has any.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Brodigan. Any questions from the committee? Okay, seeing none, thank you, sir, for your time this morning. That concludes those on the list who signed up ahead of time to speak. If there's anybody in the attendee room that wishes to speak on LD 1782, please raise your virtual hand, and we will recognize you and bring you in at this time. Okay, seeing none, then we will conclude the public hearing for LD 1782. Let me move some people around here. Okay, up next, we will have LD 1779, which is an act to protect election integrity by regulating possession of ballots and voting machines and devices. I will bring in the bill sponsor, Representative Peirce. And we will open the public hearing for LD 1779. And Representative, you are free to start when you are ready.
Thank you so much, Representative Chiazzo. Can everyone hear me okay? I'm having in my car now.
You're a little choppy. You're a little choppy, but we'll, if we need to restart, I'll let you know. Maybe try with the video
Okay,
off.
thank you. I'll just get going then. Senator Lucchini, Representative Chiazzo, and members of the Veterans Affairs Committee. Okay. Is that better?
Better, yes, thank you. Thank you, yes.
Okay. Senator Lucchini, Representative Chiazzo, and esteemed members of the Veterans and Legal Affairs Committee. I'm Representative Teresa Peirce, serving House District 44 in Falmouth. Thank you for the opportunity to present LD 1779, an act to protect election integrity by regulating the possession of ballots and voting machines and devices. I want to begin by recognizing that we here in Maine are extremely fortunate. Our election officials are top-notch. Our system is very secure. Members of the committee previously on election policy, so you are well aware that I have an incredible confidence in our local and state election officials. But the fact of the matter is that we have recently seen chain of custody issues in other states, such as Arizona and Colorado, which have compromised voting systems and election security within those states. That has prompted us to take a thorough look at our election laws and consider whether we could strengthen them to ensure the integrity of our most fundamental democratic process. LD 1779 is about eliminating any ambiguity in our laws to safeguard against interference in Maine elections. Specifically, this bill requires that municipal clerks retain possession, custody, and control over sealed ballot containers unless the law expressly authorizes their transfer to another entity. Requires that anyone entitled to obtain original ballots for inspection keep them in their secure custody, with any inspection subject to oversight by an appropriate official, and prohibits municipal clerks from transferring possession, custody, or control of a voting machine or device to any person except as authorized by the Secretary of State. When the section these issues, I was glad to put it in with these common sense reforms. I believe the secretary answer any questions, and I appreciate your flexibility with me as I deal with some internet issues on my home front.
No worries, Representative. We cut 95% of that, so I think the ultimate. I think we got after or just before. If you have any questions, I'm sure the Secretary of State can answer them, and she is here as well. So, any questions for the bill sponsor while we have her here before she drops completely? Seeing none. Thank you, Representative. We appreciate your flexibility, and sorry we are running so late. Hopefully that did not affect your internet.
Oh, no worries. Thank you so much. Okay, I don't see any bill co-sponsors in the meeting room. I don't know if there are several co-sponsors on the committee. I don't know if anybody would like to speak at this time as a co-sponsor. If so, please raise your virtual hand and we will recognize you at this time. All right, seeing none, then up next we have the Secretary of State, Secretary Bellows. Thank you for joining us this morning. And again, apologies for the delay. I know everybody's time is at a premium, so thank you for sticking with us. And the floor is yours, Madam Secretary, when you are ready.
Good morning, Representative Piazza, distinguished members of the Joint Standing Committee on Veteran and Legal Affairs. I am Secretary of State Shauna Bellows, here today to speak in favor of LD 1779, which would strengthen Maine's chain of custody laws to guard against outside political interference in election administration. The Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, defines chain of custody as a process used to track the movement and control of an asset through its life cycle by documenting each person and organization who handles an asset, the date, time it was collected or transferred, and the purpose of the transfer. This is an extraordinarily important security principle in the world of elections. Election officials must oversee and guarantee the chain of custody by which election materials, including ballots and machines, are secure at every step in the elections process, from production through distribution and use following an election. Chain of custody of ballots is critical for ballot secrecy and integrity. Interestingly enough, in our history for many years in this nation, ballots were not secret. Political coercion and payment for votes were documented and even common in some jurisdictions. Tammany Hall comes to mind, until reforms of the late 1800s brought about the secret ballot. Unfortunately, over the last year, we have seen efforts to overturn the concept of a secret ballot, to suggest that votes should be traced back to individual voters by political or governmental entities with a vested interest in the outcome. LD 1779 would guard against this by prohibiting ballots from being turned over to a third party that might seek to alter, damage, trace, or even destroy the ballots themselves. Similarly, the chain of custody of voting machines, especially electronic tabulators used in our larger municipalities, is critical to ensuring that no outside entity can hack or alter the internal code in any effort to alter or disrupt accurate tabulation. In Colorado and Arizona in 2021, we witnessed such machines being turned over to partisan political entities. Taxpayers are now left having to replace extraordinarily expensive equipment because of those political machinations. LD 1779 would prevent that from happening in our state. To be clear, chain of custody procedures for ballots and machines are currently explicit in Maine statute. Title 21A, Section 698 is clear about the procedures for securing ballots, including those that are used and unused. Sections 814 and 854, also in Title 21A, state plainly that the municipal clerk has custody of voting machines and electronic tabulators utilized by the municipality. Section 739 provides for inspection of ballots and voting lists by the governor, either branch of the legislature, any legislative committee, or a court of competent jurisdiction. LD 1779 does not change existing law, but strengthens our chain of custody laws by prohibiting the transfer of ballots or equipment to third parties. I'll wrap up by saying we are so lucky. Maine's election officials from our department through local town clerks all across the state do amazing, tireless work, putting in long hours to run our free, fair, and secure elections. LD 1779 is a safeguard against election subversion and will help prevent problems that other states have seen where the integrity of ballots and equipments has been compromised. Public confidence is strengthened when the public understands that our elections are administered by professional, nonpartisan officials with appropriate checks and balances, including chain of custody procedures. Thank you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Any questions for Secretary Bellows? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Madam Secretary. I think we have you. No, I think that's it for today. So you're welcome to stay if you'd like. If not, we completely understand, and thank you for your patience and apologies for the delays this morning. So we're going to continue with those in favor. And next up, we have Patty Du Bois, and she'll be followed by Ann Luther, and I will bring Ann in. And so, Ms. Du Bois, if you would please name, town you're from, who you are representing, if anyone, and you have 3 minutes when you are ready. And Happy New Year, by the way.
Thank you. Happy New Year to you all as well. Senator Lucchini, Representative Chiazzo, and members of the Veteran and Legal Affairs Committee. My name is Patty Du Bois. I represent the Maine Towns and City Clerks Association Legislative Policy Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this morning on LD 1779, and we are speaking in support of this measure. Although it may seem obvious that municipal clerks must maintain custody of ballots and voting machines, we feel it's prudent to codify this in statute to ensure that all election officials can easily reference these restrictions. Municipal clerks who are new to administering elections may be unaware that these materials must be secured throughout the year and not just during an election season or cycle. In addition, well-meaning clerks may want to be cooperative when asked by schools or unions or community groups or others to use these materials for instruction, polls, or votes that they administer or for other reasons. Your municipal clerks are the election professionals. We understand and support the notion that election security and integrity is paramount in these uncertain times. Therefore, we support this legislation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Just did it to myself. I muted myself. Thank you, Mr. Boys. I appreciate your testimony this morning. Any questions from the committee? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Mr. Boys. Up next, speaking in favor as well, is Ann Luther, and she will be followed by Alicia Melnick, also speaking in favor. So, Ms. Luther, when you are ready, you may proceed.
Good morning, Representative Chiazzo, Senator Lucchini, members of the committee. My name is Ann Luther. I'm a resident of Trenton. I'm here today as a volunteer, the chair of the Advocacy Committee for the League of Women Voters of Maine, and we're testifying in support of LD 1779. The League of Women Voters, as some of you know, is a nonpartisan political organization that has worked for over 100 years to encourage the informed and active participation of people in their government, to increase understanding of major public policy issues, and to influence public policy through education and advocacy. We never support political parties or candidates. In furtherance of its mission, the League supports voting systems that are secure and transparent, and we believe that in Maine we have enjoyed a generations-long record of professional, nonpartisan, voter-friendly administration of elections through trusted town, city, and state officials, and through good laws that protect our election administration. So we have confidence in our elections, and we have no doubt that that encourages voter participation. LD 1779 builds on our existing laws. While the existing provisions are important and go a long way toward protecting election integrity, they do not expressly require clerks to retain possession, custody, and control of ballots, ballot containers, voting machines, and devices. LD 1779 would provide clerks with an additional tool, giving them the express basis to deny any request for transfer of custody of ballots or voting devices not in compliance with the law. And the rest of my testimony echoes what has already been said, so I don't need to repeat it, but for all of those reasons, we support this measure and believe that 1779 deserves the full support of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. take any questions if you have them.
Thank you, Ms. Luther. Any questions from the committee? Okay, seeing none, thank you for your time this morning, Ms. Luther. Up next, we have Alicia Melnick, and she will be followed by Megan Sway. So, Ms. Melnick, when you are ready, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Representative Chiazzo. Senator Lucchini, Representative Chiazzo, members of the Veterans and Legal Affairs Committee. My name is Alicia Melnick, and I am here today on behalf of the Center for Secure and Modern Elections to testify in support of LD 1779. As you've heard, this bill makes some just pragmatic, reasonable changes to Maine law to ensure that our state continues to administer secure and safe elections that all eligible Mainers can participate in and trust. While Maine has already set a high standard for election administration and integrity, it's critical to continue to innovate in the election space to adapt to any potential threats. LD 1779 does just that by clarifying and placing appropriate limits on possession and chain of custody for ballots, providing detail about where ballots may be stored, and adds additional safeguards for inspections. Finally, it requires voting machines and devices to remain in the possession of the municipal clerk unless directly authorized by the Secretary of State. As you've heard, LD 1779 empowers those who are experts on election administration to do what they do best: maintain oversight of each ballot through the process to ensure that it is counted properly without being tampered with or facing technological challenges. We support these steps to clarify and safeguard our election system and eliminate any potential for interference by third parties that could cause security issues or damage election equipment. LD 1779 is a smart step forward in election administration. We thank Representative Peirce and Secretary of State Bellows for bringing it forward and urge you all to vote ought to pass. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Melnick. Any questions from the committee? Okay, seeing none, thank you for your time this morning. Up next, we have Megan Sway, and she'll be followed by Penny Morrill. So if you could, Ms. Sway, please name, town you're from, who you are representing, if anyone, and you have 3 minutes when you are ready.
Good morning. My name is Megan Sway, and I'm the Policy Director at the ACLU of Maine. I live in Portland, Maine. The people before me have really given better reasoning for this than my testimony I've submitted online, but we just support this committee protecting the right to vote, promoting rather than restricting participation, and ensuring the integrity of our elections. And we believe this bill will do that. So on behalf of the ACLU of Maine, please, we urge you to support LD 1779. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sway. Definitely one of the records for the shortest testimony so far this year, or the session, I should say. So much appreciated and very poignant. So any questions for Ms. Sway from the committee? Okay, seeing none, thank you for your time this morning. And up next, we have Penny Morrill. So Ms. Morrill, please state your name, the town you're from, and any group you're representing, and you may proceed when you are ready.
Thank you, Representative Chiazzo. I am Penny Morrill, and I'm the State Director for Concerned Women for America of Maine. And Senator Lucchini, Representative Chiazzo, and members of the Veterans and Legal Affairs Committee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. I'm Penny Morrill, State Director of Concerned Women for America of Maine, speaking for Concerned Women for America Legislative Action Committee. Concerned Women for America, CWA, is the largest public policy women's organization in the nation, with hundreds of thousands of members across the country. CWA of Maine opposes this bill and 1830, an act to amend the election laws, as well as LD 1779, an act to protect election integrity by regulating possession of ballots and voting machines and devices. Integrity over the elections process must be guarded with great care. Concerned Women for America of Maine believes that LD 1779 and LD 813 infringe upon election integrity by handing over too much power to one person. In this instance, it happens to be the Secretary of State. For the record, the political persuasion of the person who is handed too much power to control elections matters not to CWA, because as the old proverbial saying says, Power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. These bills are a bad idea. And so we asked this committee to vote LD 1779 and 1830 ought not to pass. Thank you. And I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you for your service. And CWA is the organization that prays for every one of you and sends you a postcard, hopefully once a month. God bless.
Thank you, Ms. Morrell. Sorry, thank you, Ms. Morrell. And apologies to the committee and those in the public. We all those signing up speaking for, we've gone through that list already. There are none, neither for nor against. So we've moved into the against. So thank you, Ms. Morrell, for your time. Any questions for Ms. Morrell from the committee? Okay, seeing none. Thank you very much for your time this morning.
Do I need to stay and testify on 1830 or are you all set?
If you'd like to stay and testify, that's fine. You're on the list. So when we get to that hearing, if you're in the attendee room, we'll bring you back. And if you've moved on, then you may want to submit in writing just to make sure it goes in the right folder. But you're welcome to stay in the attendee list if you'd like.
It is. It's the same testimony.
Okay.
It's the same for both.
Entirely up to you. Whatever you're comfortable with.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay, if there is anybody in the attendee room wishing to speak on LD 1779 we are in, please raise your virtual hand. I see Representative Brooks. So I will bring Representative Brooks in. And give her a second to come in and get acclimated. Hopefully she's not having the same internet troubles the rest of us are having this morning.
Thank you, Representative Cayazzo. I am here for LD 1821.
You are, okay. Yeah. All right, so we will kick that one off in just a second. You're welcome to stay in if you'd like. So we're still in public hearing for LD 1779. If there's anybody in the attendee room that wishes to speak on LD 1779, please raise your virtual hand and I will recognize you and bring you in. Okay, seeing none, then we will conclude the public hearing for LD 1779. Okay, let's see here. Up next, we have LD 1821, which is an act to make interference with election officials a Class C crime. Let me grab Representative White, bring him in as the bill sponsor. So Representative White is here, so we will begin the public hearing for LD 1821, which again is an act to make interfering with an election official a Class C crime. Representative White, sir, when you are ready, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And Happy New Year to everybody.
Happy New Year, sir.
And as friendly as you all look, I still seem to get a little nervous when I present for some reason, but so thank you again.
We'll try and keep Representative McCrate from biting your head off this time.
Yeah, right. Must be. Well, thank you again. And Senator Lucchini, Representative Cayazzo, and members of the Joint Standing Committee on Veterans and Legal Affairs. As you know, my name is Bruce White, and I represent District 109, which is part of Waterville. I'm speaking today to present LD 1821, which would make interfering with an election official a Class C crime. I have had the pleasure of volunteering at elections in my hometown on a number of occasions. Our Waterville election workers are truly amazing. They are nonpartisan and they work long hours to make sure that every citizen of Waterville has the opportunity to cast their ballot. That's why I was concerned when I heard about threats against election workers all across the country. It is disturbing to say the least. In an NPR story in August, Republican and Democratic secretaries of the state shared threats that they or their local election officials had received. Since November 2020, there has been an alarming increase in the number of death threats and violence made against election workers and officials across the country, including here in our home state. LD 1821 would make it a Class C crime for someone to interfere by force, violence, intimidation, or any physical act with an election official who is performing, or if the perpetrator believes the election official is performing an official function related to a federal, state, or local election. Additionally, by placing this offense in Title 21A, it allows the Attorney General's office to pursue and prosecute crimes that may arise under this provision, holding perpetrators accountable and giving legal recourse to election officials. By supporting LD 1828, we can adequately protect those who tirelessly work to ensure all of us are able to cast our ballot on election day. Thank you for your time, and I am happy to answer any questions the committee may have concerning this bill.
Thank you, Representative White. Very much appreciate your time, and apologies for the delay this morning. I know it kind of set everybody off a little bit. So any questions for the bill sponsor from the committee? All right, seeing none, thank you, Representative, for kicking off the discussion. Much appreciated.
Thank you and have a good day.
Thank you. Up next, Representative Brooks. I believe this was the bill you wish to testify on.
Yes.
The floor is yours, Representative.
Okay. Yes. Thank you for having the hearing, and Representative Caiazzo and members, honorable members of the Veterans Legal Justice and Affairs Committee. Sorry, Veterans and Legal Affairs Committee. I also get a little nervous around this time, but I appreciate seeing all your pleasant faces, and I really appreciate Representative White for introducing this really critical matter. Violence, threats of violence really have very limited and no place in our society, and certainly no place in our elections. As an elected official, unfortunately, I have to say that having threats of violence or alleged threats of violence, vandalism, things of the like, maybe not because of my role as an elected official, but perhaps because of a bumper sticker, maybe, I don't know. It's just a very real problem in our society. And an elected official performing an election as really needs to be something that we take very seriously. And I can't underestimate the problems that people have faced in America with elections. And our election officials, Kathy Monteo, one of our election officials, a city clerk here in Lewiston, reached out to me about this bill particularly. And I really take this very seriously. I also, I think that it's important that we balance things in the legislature, not taking things very lightly. But at the same time, I don't think this threat can be underestimated. And I really applaud this committee for really doing the work of deliberating this matter. And again, thank you, Representative White, for bringing this matter forward. And thank you to my town clerk for really alerting me to this hearing.
Thank you, Representative Brooks. We very much appreciate you taking the time to come before us this morning. Any questions for the good representative from the committee? Okay, seeing none, thank you for your testimony this morning. Up next, we'll recognize Secretary Bellows. Welcome back, Madam Secretary. When you are ready, the floor is yours.
Good morning again, Representative Chiazzo, Senator Lucchini, members of the Joint Standing Committee on Veterans and Legal Affairs. I am Secretary of State Shauna Bellows, here in support of LD 1821. We often discuss the right to vote and its fundamental role as a cornerstone of our democracy. What garners less attention is that it is the election workers, in Maine, our municipal clerks, who make it possible for every Maine citizen to exercise their right to vote through the impartial administration of free and fair elections. Our right to vote is enabled by our municipal clerks. And when our municipal clerks are threatened, especially in the course of performing their official duties, our democracy itself is threatened. There are already a variety of felony crimes in Title 21A, Section 674, our election statute, and appropriately so. Previous legislatures have recognized that attacks on our elections are attacks on democracy and demand serious consequences. Among the Class C crimes listed in the statute are voting knowing that the person is not eligible to do so, attempting to vote knowing that the person is not eligible to do so, having once voted, whether within or outside the state, again, voting in the same election, voting by using the name of another, or attempting to vote by using the name of another. This bill adds a sixth Class C crime to the election statute. And I state, this bill would make it a crime to intentionally interfere by force, violence, or intimidation, or by any physical act with any public official who is in fact performing or the person believes is performing an official function relating to a federal, state, or municipal election. In other words, if someone knowingly and with intent threatens an election official when they're performing their official duties at a polling place, perhaps running an election itself, that would be a crime. Imagine for a moment the consequences of that situation. A person threatening an election official while they're performing their official duties with force or violence, and what that could mean for every voter in that jurisdiction and the election itself, not to mention the safety and well-being of the election official. Some might think such a threat unlikely. Perhaps a decade ago, it would have been unthinkable. Unfortunately, as Representative White referenced, in the last year, we have seen a dramatic increase in documented incidents against election officials across the country. In July, the FBI announced a new law enforcement task force to deal with threats against election workers at the federal level. In December, a national news organization, Reuters, conducted a nationwide investigation identifying 850 messages that met the level of threat that is a violation of federal law. The Election Assistance Commission highlights reasons that attacks on election officials are unique and may put their safety at greater risk. I've quoted that in my testimony, but keep in mind that unlike private citizens, state and local election officials are public servants. Their contact information is often a public record. The public is less likely to trust the outcome of an election if their preferred candidate loses. And individual members of the public may blame the system for political losses or distress and take that out on election workers. And then third and important, women are more likely to report facing extreme harassment or threats online. And this is very concerning given that a majority of our election officials are women, in fact. Currently, crimes under Title 21A election statute are rare, but when they happen, the Office of the Attorney General has the enforcement authority to take prompt action to prosecute and hold the perpetrator accountable. We support this legislation because it takes a statewide approach to a growing national problem. An attack on our election workers when they are running an election is an attack on our democracy. And I just want to add, it's in my testimony as well, we're not going to speak to the specifics of the incidents to protect the safety of the clerks themselves, but over the past year, we did receive 2 documented reports with documented threats against municipal election clerks, and that is unacceptable.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Yeah, obviously, unfortunately, it's becoming more and more prevalent, and I think it's an important issue for this committee to take up and address for sure. Representative Corey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I'm a former member of the Criminal Justice and Public Safety Committee, I definitely, take any sort of threats and everything very, very seriously. But I also take criminal law, very seriously, as you probably understand, having, been a former lobbyist that lobbied often in that committee. Under the current Class D crime, are you aware of anyone prosecuted under that statute?
So one of the things that I think is really important to keep in mind is, of course, criminal threatening or violent attacks are currently criminal acts under Title 17A, the criminal code. And so if you or me or anyone in the state is attacked or our life threatened, we can report it to local law enforcement. And depending on where we live, the response, we are very fortunate here in Central Maine. Sheriff Ken Mason is on my cell phone and very responsive. Then that is in the hands of the local district attorney to potentially prosecute it, is at their discretion. What makes Title 21A different is it makes it an election issue. It makes it an elections-oriented crime. And it transfers jurisdiction for crimes that are contained in Title 21A, and this is what this bill would do, to the jurisdiction of the Office of the Attorney General. So that if an elections clerk should be threatened in the course of an election, that would immediately be reported to the state and action taken at the state level and then prosecuted by the Office of the Attorney General. The reason that we think this is important is we think that this is not only a crime against a person, but a crime against the election itself, because the intent, the disruptions that this is creating across the country are undermining, in part, the integrity of our elections themselves. So that's what makes this different. And I encourage you to take a look at resources with the Election Assistance Commission or the FBI that document why, from their perspective, national enforcement authorities see that this is a different issue than traditional criminal threatening against a person who's not in the course of their official duty of conducting an election. The only second thing that I would say is some might also say, well, this is already a federal crime. The FBI has a new task force to enforce this. When I was head of the ACLU, we opposed most new crimes. But one thing that we did support when I was head of the ACLU was extending the human trafficking statute from just a federal crime to making it enforceable at the state level, because we were concerned that the trafficking of persons, that resources at the federal level were insufficient to address the problem at the state level. So this is not unprecedented, although I share your caution and your history of having spoken out against decriminalization and taking a significant amount of caution in supporting any enhancements or changes to the criminal code.
Just a real quick follow-up, Mr. Chair. So are you aware of local law enforcement agencies or prosecutors not taking these types of crimes seriously when they occur at the local level or at a polling place? You had kind of mentioned that, it's important that the AG handle these because, local prosecutors and law enforcement agencies have discretion. You had said, are you aware of them using that discretion not to prosecute these types of crimes?
Again, this is not to suggest any concerns or deficiencies on our local law enforcement. They do a tremendous job. But our election law in Title 21A is overseen by the Secretary of State and enforced by the Office of the Attorney General. And we see these crimes as different because they involve not merely, and not to say mere, the threats of violence, of force and intimidation against election clerks are serious in of themselves, and they are serious because they undermine the effective, safe, and secure administration of elections. And that's why we think it is more appropriate that election clerks who contact our office, if they think someone votes twice, if someone mishandles ballots, if someone tampers with equipment, all of those offenses that might undermine the safety and security of the election come to the state level. And that's why we're supportive of this approach. is we believe it's grounded in the principle of protecting our elections and election security.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Corey. Any other questions for Secretary Bellows? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, Madam Secretary, for participating with us again this morning. I will recognize one of the co-sponsors, Representative Reckitt, and offer her the floor if she wishes to speak to LD 1821. Representative, when you are ready.
Thank you so much. And facilitate my return to the other two committees that I'm simultaneously sitting on, as well as testifying here.
Welcome back.
Shoot myself, you know. Good afternoon, Senator Lucchini, Representative Caiazzo, and the members of the Veterans and Legal Affairs Committee. My name is Lois Galgay-Reckitt, and I am the representative from District 31 in South Portland. I come before you today in support of LD 1821, an act to make interfering with an election official a Class C crime. In spite of my personal reservations that are similar to Representative Corey's around increasing classes of crime, I still am in favor of this particular initiative. I've worked in a variety of roles at polling places in South Portland over the years, including 24 years as a clerk and 8 as warden in House District 31. In all of my years of working at the polls in what is now my House district, I worked literally from dawn until way past dusk. I remember one presidential election, I think it was Jimmy Carter's, when we didn't finish until 4 a.m. the next day. Thank heavens for voting machines now. We might as well have been volunteering for the pittance we were paid. As I said once, while trying to recruit more workers, when I started, it was me and the little old ladies, and now I am one of those ladies myself. Those who toil to make our elections in Maine safe and secure should be confident they are safe and secure themselves. I think we owe them nothing less. So I hope that you will join me in supporting the passage of LD 1821. Thank you for your time, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Representative. Any questions for Representative Reckitt from the committee? All right, seeing none, best of luck on your other two committees. Hopefully we haven't usurped too much of your time.
No, that's right. One of them was on break when this happened, so it was convenient. So thanks for your attention.
Perfect. Thank you, Representative. All right, we'll continue on with those in favor. We will start with Lisa Goodwin. She will be followed by Patty Du Bois. And just a reminder to the general public, if you are trying to log into this meeting, you will need a meeting code, and the meeting code is 120954 in order to get in. So with that, Ms. Goodwin, I will give you 3 minutes, and the floor is yours when you would like to begin.
Thank you. Good morning. Senator Lucchini, Representative Caiazzo, and members of the Veterans and Legal Affairs Committee. My name is Lisa Goodwin. I'm the Bangor City Clerk and a member of the Legislative Policy Committee for the Maine Town and City Clerks Association. The association is in strong support of LD 1821, and we thank you for the opportunity to outline our points. Municipal clerks are charged with administering local, county, state, and federal elections. Threats, harassment, and intimidation to election officials are becoming more and more common across the nation. Maine is no exception to this unsavory trend. Although there is no formal reporting mechanism, at least one municipal clerk in Maine received a death threat after the 2020 election, only to find that this type of threat to an election official is only a misdemeanor Class D crime. A recent survey commissioned by the Brennan Center for Justice found that 1 in 3 election officials now feel unsafe doing their jobs. Reuters identified more than 100 threats of death or violence made to U.S. election workers and officials in relation to the 2020 election. Social media platforms have made it increasingly easy to threaten and intimidate by allowing people to maintain their anonymity behind their keyboards. Municipal clerks are your election professionals. We work with local election volunteers to administer elections, many of whom are retired or have worked elections for years. We are the boots on the ground and work tirelessly to ensure the integrity of every election by following all of the election laws, including the ones that aren't popular with or supported by one faction or another. We are asking for your support to ensure that members of the public who choose to intimidate or threaten any election officials are held accountable to the highest degree possible. These crimes must be categorized as more severe than a Class D crime in order to better protect our election officials, but also to discourage this unscrupulous behavior. The Maine Town and City Clerks Association appreciates the opportunity to share its testimony with you, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Goodwin. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony this morning. Up next, we will have Ms. Du Bois again, and she will be followed by Angela Holmes. So Ms. Du Bois, welcome back.
Thank you.
And whenever you are ready.
Thank you, Representative Chiazzo, Senator Lucchini, and members of the Veteran and Legal Affairs Committee. My name is Patty Du Bois. I'm the city clerk with the city of Waterville, and I thank you for the opportunity to present testimony in support of LD 1821. Municipal clerks across the state have seen a sharp increase in citizens' anger, frustration, and suggestions of impropriety regarding election administration, situations that were unheard of just a couple of years ago. Being on the receiving end of a voter's profanity-laced rants are commonplace now. At least one clerk in Maine has received a credible death threat from a voter. Technology has made it unbelievably easy for misinformed citizens to threaten election officials. Email, voicemail, and social media are platforms easily used that allow a degree of anonymity. We cannot become desensitized to this disturbing trend. These threats are rarely, if ever, made in person, but are no less disturbing to the recipients. Seasoned municipal clerks, ballot clerks, and election clerks are choosing to leave their professions because of the hostile environment in which they serve. Although laws exist that offer the general population recourse when being harassed or threatened, this proposed legislation would be specifically targeted to protect those whose job it is to administer the voting process itself, a function that is politically and emotionally charged. Is this a solution looking for a problem? We already have one death threat here in Maine. One death threat to a fellow clerk is one too many. Please be proactive and support this legislation to help create a deterrent to those who threaten election officials for simply doing their jobs. Thank you for the opportunity to speak, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you again, Mr. Boyce. Any questions from the committee? All right, seeing none, thank you again for your testimony.
Thank you.
Up next, we have Angela Holmes, and she'll be followed by Ann Luther. So Ms. Holmes, if you would please, your name, town you are from, and the group you are representing, if any.
Thank you, Representative Chiazzo, Senator Lucchini, and members of the committee. I'm Angela Holmes. I'm the Assistant City Administrator and City Clerk for the City of Westbrook. I'm here speaking as an interested municipal clerk on this matter, and thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of LD 1821. So this legislation would declassify the interference by force, violence, or intimidation of an election official performing their official duties to a level consistent with several other election-related crimes, such as voting using the name of another person or attempting to vote more than once in the same election. We know that elections are a time when emotions can run high. As a municipal clerk, we take whatever steps are necessary to diffuse potentially volatile situations. In Westbrook, de-escalation training is a mandatory part of our election worker training before every election. It's part of the reality of running an election that will experience agitated or even aggressive voter interactions at some point. We hope that we never encounter the threats of violence that some of our colleagues have recently experienced, but it has happened. And the potential is there, especially during high-profile elections. Just speaking from my own experience today, these types of potentially volatile interactions do not happen often. Most of my voters are wonderful, civic-minded folk, but these incidents are happening now with increased frequency. Again, just speaking for myself, I know that I can generally expect at least one interaction with a highly agitated voter each election, requiring the use of de-escalation techniques. This legislation does not stop violence or threats of violence from happening, but it treats these encounters with the same level of consideration that election-related crimes receive. It lets election officials know that the state treats our safety while we administer elections for Mainers to be as important as the votes that we're protecting. Thank you for your time today, and I am happy to answer any questions that you may have for me.
Thank you, Ms. Holmes. Any questions from the community? Representative Riley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to say thank you so much, Angela, for providing testimony today. And again, thank you for all the incredible work that you do for the city of Westbrook. Representative Salisbury and I are very impressed with what you've done.
Thank you so much, Representative Riley. We've got a great team here. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Riley. Any other questions for Ms. Holmes from the committee? Representative Wood.
Yes, thank you, Representative Chiazzo. Ms. Holmes, you said that there was de-escalation training. Who all goes through that training again?
So we have that training for all of our election workers that attend, that anyone that wants to work at an election, we provide mandatory training prior to each election. And we've incorporated de-escalation training as part of that mandatory training. So it's everyone that shows up at the polls on election day to work there is required to attend that and receive that training.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Wood. Any other questions for Ms. Holmes? All right, seeing none, thank you, Ms. Holmes, for taking the time to meet with us this morning. Appreciate your testimony. Up next, we have Ann Luther, and I think that will wrap up those speaking in favor. So Ms. Luther, when you are ready, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, still morning. Representative Chiazzo, Senator Lucchini, and members of the committee. My name again is Ann Luther. I'm a resident of Trenton, and I'm here today as the Volunteer Advocacy Committee Chair for the League of Women Voters of Maine. We are in support of LD 1821. I'll skip the League preamble. We did that just a few minutes ago, but I will say over the years, the League has testified before this committee on literally hundreds of bills concerning voting rights, elections, and campaign finance reform. This morning, for the first time, probably the last time, we are supporting the reclassification of a crime. We are not experts in criminal law. But as close observers and students of the democratic process, we believe that threats, intimidation, and assaults against election officials are attacks not just on those individuals, but on our democracy itself. Like intimidation of a witness or an assault of a police officer, interfering with an election official threatens an institution that keeps our republic safe and fair. In June 2020, you've heard some of these references cited before, but the Brennan Center commissioned a study of local election officials around the country. Most of those said that they chose their jobs because they wanted to serve their community and ensure that elections are run as they should. In all of the years and through all of the clerks that I've known, I will tell you that I could not tell which party affiliation they declared. Their professionalism and their adherence to the law was what you noticed about them more than anything else. And yet 1 in 6 of these election officials reports that they have been threatened because of their job. Reuters documented, as you heard before, more than 800 threats against election officials nationwide, including more than 100 that include threats of death or physical violence. We know that there have been these instances in Maine, and we know that through the New York Times research, fear and stress is causing a mass exodus of seasoned election professionals. I know of one myself who found another job because of the disrespect shown her in the course of her duties. This is a trend that should worry us all. If competent, capable, intelligent, dedicated people are afraid to do the jobs, that is not a good trend for democracy. Maine's local and state election officials are dedicated public servants who deserve our support. They deserve to feel our support. Passage of 1821 would provide a measure of protection by strengthening the legal consequences for those who threaten or intimidate them. We urge you to support 1821. Thank you for the chance to testify. Take any questions if you have them.
Thank you, Ms. Luther. Any questions for Ms. Luther from committee? All right, seeing none, thank you for your testimony this morning. That concludes those registered speaking for. And again, just a reminder to the public, if you are trying to get into the Zoom meeting, you will need a password, a passcode, and the passcode is 120954. That wraps up everybody speaking, registered to speak for the bill. I don't see any, so one speaking, we'll take speaking against, and that is Ms. Sway. So let's bring her, is she in? Don't see her in the attendee list. I thought I saw her in there earlier. Oh, she's coming in. All right, thank you, Senator. Good morning again, Ms. Sway. Apologies for the confusion coming in, and the floor is yours when you are ready.
Thank you so much, Representative Cayazzo, Senator Lucchini, and members of the Joint Standing Committee on Veterans and Legal Affairs. Good morning again. My name is Megan Sway, and I'm Policy Director at the ACLU of Maine. We're a statewide organization committed to advancing and preserving civil liberties in Maine. On behalf of our members, I'm here to oppose LD 1821 because it creates a new felony for behavior that's already a crime without evidence that it will lead to greater safety for election workers. As you've heard today, many clerks and election workers in the state are in fear for their safety. This comes on the heels of threats to some clerks in our state, as well as news reports across the country of threats of violence against election workers. In our opposition to this bill, I want to be really clear that we don't mean to diminish the real fear that election workers face or the threats to democracy inherent in much of the reported harassment. However, the method this bill uses to address those threats, we believe will not result in greater safety to election workers or integrity of our voting system. If enacted, this bill would make it a Class C crime, which is punishable by up to 5 years incarceration, to intentionally interfere by force, violence, or intimidation, or by any physical act with any public official who is in fact performing, or the person believes is performing, an official function related to a federal, state, or municipal election. The issue is that the behavior that the language of this bill addresses is already a crime, obstructing government administration. And any violent threats are already crimes as well. Criminal threatening, terrorizing, and stalking are just a few. There's no evidence that making interference with elections a felony rather than a misdemeanor is more likely to deter people from making threats. Nor will it provide greater time or safety to clerks if a person is arrested, because there's no legal difference in the time a person is held after an arrest for a felony versus a misdemeanor. Our jails are already overfull. We lock up more people in this country than any country in the history of the world, and our incarceration rate in Maine is higher than countries like Turkey, Nicaragua, and Russia. The criminal legal system disproportionately arrests people of color as compared to white people, so that while 1.6% of Maine's population is Black people make up 5% of all arrests and more than 10% of those in our prisons. It doesn't have to be this way. A better world begins with making the commitment to stop turning to the criminal legal system to solve society's problems. Your committee has the critical responsibility of overseeing the statutes by which our elections are administered in Maine. We urge you in all of your deliberations to seek ways in which to promote rather than restrict participation, and to ensure that the integrity of our elections is protected, so that the elections reflect the will of the citizenry rather than the power of a few. Unfortunately, because we believe this bill would accomplish neither, we urge you to vote on it to pass. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Sway. Very much appreciate your testimony this morning. Representative Corey.
Thank you for being here, Mrs. Sway. I'm excited to see you because I haven't seen you in my new committees at all. So, now
good to see you.
Opportunity to see you. So, as I'd mentioned that, I was previously on criminal justice, and we take these types of bills super seriously there. So you had mentioned going to a Class C crime would take it up to a 5-year penalty. Can you tell us what the penalties are for a Class D crime, which this currently is?
Yes, a Class D crime is punishable by up to 364 days in jail.
Right.
So it's already it's up to just under a year in jail.
So you had mentioned that, well, okay, so the Secretary of State had basically mentioned that people would see sort of very little time, in jail, for doing, this type of a thing. But, if this was actually prosecuted, it could be prosecuted up to 364 days, correct?
Correct.
Plus a fine, like, what is it, like, is it $2,000 fine on a?
I think it's $1,000.
1,000 on a Class D. Okay, so but the reality is it could go to 364 days, and that's just for the intimidation piece or whatever that would be of the election worker. That's not including if they hit the worker or made violent threats or anything like that. Those would be much bigger crimes, correct?
It depends on the crime. There are other crimes that are also Class Ds, but there are also threats of violence that are Class Cs. It depends on the specific situations, but yes, you could theoretically charge for both behaviors, both obstructing government administration and the violent threat.
So this could already push into felony territory if we did this. So you had mentioned that, and it's interesting because, you kind of think about, the criminal mind, right? And how things, kind of work. And you had mentioned that it's very unlikely that raising the class of crime would actually dissuade somebody from committing the crime. Like, people don't crack open Title 17A before committing a crime, right, to see what the penalty is?
Correct. I mean, I think our real concern with this bill is that making it a felony does not deter the behavior. It does. People who are making scary, violent threats are not thinking, well, it's only a misdemeanor, therefore I won't commit this offense against another person. Oh, it's a felony, I guess I will be deterred. I mean, I think I flipped that around, but basically the level of crime, there's no evidence that the level of crime is what deters people from making these actions.
And here's another kind of interesting question, because, I'd heard some testimony regarding this earlier today. And is it possible that raising the level of crime could give an election worker a false sense of security? Meaning that, they might actually believe that they now have this, protection that they didn't already have. Therefore, people are not going to commit this type of crime against them.
That is one fear. I think what I heard from people's testimony was a desire that the seriousness of this offense be recognized. I think there are ways to do that other than creating felonies. I think there are ways for elected officials to stand behind election workers and to condemn this kind of behavior and to take a stronger stance publicly to defend people, to show that they are supportive of election workers and that they oppose this kind of behavior without creating new felony crimes.
So just lastly, like, somebody that could do something like this, and it's horrible if somebody does something like this. I mean, they could be suffering from mental illness, correct? I mean, they could, have delusional ideas about, what's happening in elections and everything. And it's, I mean, police officers can certainly take people into protective custody if they're acting weird, correct?
Yeah, I don't want to make generalizations about mental health, but there was a law passed last session, LD 785, that I would urge committee members to look at, that does allow police to take people into custody if they have probable cause to believe that someone will be a danger to another. And so that there is that option in the law already as well.
Yeah, no, I'd read the Maine Prosecutors Association testimony on this, and basically what the Maine prosecutors had said that, this going to a Class C was the only way they could get people mental health, treatment as a part of probation and everything. But I think that there's other avenues for that. So that's why I was interested in, whether or not police officers could take somebody that was, having a crisis into protective custody. But thank you.
Thank you, Representative Corey. Representative McCrate.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Ms. Sway. I appreciate, some of the questions in my mind were what else, what instead. And I appreciate your saying that election officials need to be more public. The concern I have is, we're not seeing that? What if we don't see that? But my other point is, though I know Ms. Sway has no trouble speaking for herself, I don't want to put you in the position of being a mental health expert. And I think that's going a little far afield. So I appreciate your response. Thanks.
Yeah, I think this really deserves an exploration of other creative ways to get at this problem. Our whole goal here at the ACLU is to ensure the integrity of elections. And if election workers are not safe, that doesn't ensure the integrity of elections. We just don't believe that creating a new felony is the way to do that. And so we're happy to engage with people about getting creative. I know there was other testimony urging us to think about different ways. And I would be happy to engage in that because, again, I want to stress that the work that our election workers do is crucial and that we support that and want to keep them safe and just don't believe this is the method.
Thank you, Representative McCrate. Any other questions for Ms. Sway?
Thank you all.
All right, seeing none. Thank you, Ms. Sway. We appreciate your time this morning. Okay, that concludes everybody registered to testify on LD 1821. If there's anybody in the attendee room that wishes to testify that has not done so already, please raise your virtual hand and I will recognize you and bring you into the committee room. Okay, seeing none, then we will conclude the public hearing on LD 1821. Okay, finally on our list for public hearings is LD 1830, which is an act to amend the election laws. We will open up the public hearing for LD 1830 and I will recognize the bill sponsor, Senator Lucchini.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Chairman Chiazzo, members of the Veterans and Legal Affairs Committee, my name's Louis Lucchini. I represent most of Hancock County in the Senate, and I'm here to present LD 1830, an act to amend the election laws. And sorry, I've had some bad internet today, so hopefully I'm coming in all right. This is I think the last of the department bills that I have for this session. So this is a department bill from the Secretary of State's office. In the bill, I'll just quickly go over a summary of some of the things that the bill does. So first, it adds ID cards issued by federally recognized tribes as acceptable proof of identity of an applicant who's registering to vote. It changes some of the days and deadlines for political committees to caucus and nominate for vacancies. It allows the Secretary of State to designate procedures that deviate from statutory requirements for absentee balloting in certain nursing homes, something that we've seen during the pandemic when they weren't allowed to go in, to find alternative ways to safely do that. It also does some clarifying on fiscal impact statements for initiatives and removes the requirement that instructions on a petition be printed in bold or capital letters. And it does make some changes about voters seeking to bring legal challenges to the form or content of a ballot question. So that's a quick overview of what it does. I'm sure Secretary Bellows or Deputy Secretary Flynn can get deeper into the details of why this department bill was brought forward. So with that, I'll conclude and happy to take questions if anyone has it.
Thank you, Senator. Much better internet connection now, so much appreciated.
Thanks.
Any questions from the committee? Okay, seeing none, then we will commence to public testimony. I don't think there are any other co-sponsors in the room, unless there are those on the committee that would wish to speak. Okay, seeing none, then we will move to public hearing, and I will recognize Deputy Flynn. Sorry. Well, it's a new year, but welcome back, and I hope you've had a great holiday. So, Ms. Flynn, the floor is yours when you are ready.
Thank you, and may I be the first to wish you a good afternoon Senator Lucchini, Representative Chiazzo, and members of the Joint Standing Committee on Veterans and Legal Affairs. I'm Julie Flynn, Deputy Secretary of State for the Bureau of Corporations, Elections, and Commissions, and I'm here to offer our testimony in favor of our agency bill, LD 1830. I would like to just try to quickly step through what changes are being made in each section of the bill. Section 1 adds identification cards issued by federally recognized Indian tribes as acceptable proof of identity for an applicant who is registering to vote. This idea came forward as a result of a meeting between the Secretary of State and some tribal leaders regarding improving access to government for Indigenous peoples. Sections 2 and 3 of the bill provide consistent statutory language for the deadline for a party to hold a nomination caucus for either a state senate or a state representative vacancy. This deadline must be at least 15 days after the date of the governor's proclamation that declares the vacancy. So it could be a longer period than that, but it can't be less than 15 days. Section 4 repeals and replaces the current section of law that requires the municipal clerk to hold a nomination caucus, to provide absentee voting for residents of certain licensed facilities, and those include licensed nursing homes, licensed level 4 residential care facilities, and licensed assisted living programs with more than 6 beds. And I think the reason to repeal and replace it was to streamline and clarify the language governing what the absentee voting procedures are under, I put this in quotes, normal circumstances. I'm not sure what normal is anymore, but this section also now adds a process for the Secretary of State to designate an alternate method for conducting absentee voting by these residents to protect public health when one of the following circumstances has been declared in accordance with Title 22. First is nearly a health emergency. Second is an extreme public health emergency, or the third is public health threat. And the alternate procedures that we would adopt would likely be similar to the ones we adopted in 2020 for both the primary and the general elections when we were operating under an extreme public health emergency. I think those worked very well. We sort of adapted them a little bit for November 2021 because we were still under a health emergency at that point. We've received some feedback from municipal clerks since the bill was published, asking that we make a couple of amendments in this area. So I want to just explain what the requests were, and so that the committee can consider that and see whether you want to do an amendment that we would support them. The technical changes would be on page 2 of the bill. The first one on line 4, change the words "in a facility" to for residents of a facility. That way the voting might not take place in the facility itself, but it's just indicating that it's covering the residents that live there. And on line 12 of page 2, add that this section it's not only to protect the health, welfare, or safety of the residents, but also the municipal clerk staff as well. There have been some instances where there's been an outbreak of the flu or some other communicable disease at a certain facility, and clerks having to go there without an alternate method exposes them to that threat as well. The more substantive amendments really address that there's no formal declaration. If there is no formal declaration, but the facility does not allow the municipal clerk to conduct on-premises absentee voting, or if the facility has adopted restrictions on who can enter the facility and the clerk's office staff doesn't meet those restrictions, for example, vaccination status, or maybe having a certain type of vaccination, and they're not allowed to enter for that reason. We didn't have a chance to really think these through and talk about them, so if the committee's interested, we'd be happy to work with you and your analysts to help craft an amendment. You direct us, where you'd like to go with these, and we can offer some suggestions by the time of the work session. Section 5 of the bill clarifies that the fiscal impact statement for a citizen initiative petition must be printed only on the first page of the initiative below the required statement about the voter's right to read the proposed legislation before signing the petition. Unfortunately, when this section got added to the law, it got added as part of the same sentence that started with a requirement for having a unique identifier on each page where signatures appear on the petition. And the reality is, if we put a fiscal impact statement on each page, there wouldn't be room for any signatures on any page of the petition. It would be kind of a circular prohibition on having this on there. So it's really a technical amendment to match how we've interpreted the law and how that statement appears now. Section 6 removes a requirement that the instructions printed on the citizen initiative or people's veto be printed in bold type or capital letters on the petition. This is old language, and we've learned in doing readability studies for ballots and instructions that text in all capital letters, it's really hard for people who have low literacy skills to be able to figure out what the words are. And to use something in all bold text, limits your ability to use bold for emphasis rather than just putting a whole bunch of text in all bold text. Section 7 sets a deadline for the Superior Court to issue its written decision when there's been a challenge to a petition decision or to a ballot question. And that decision would be the earlier date of either 40 days after the decision on the petition is issued by the Secretary of State, or at least 90 days before the election on which the ballot question will appear. We had a problem in 2021 because of the long session and the challenge that came. It was touch and go whether we would have a decision and have the ballot question in time to do the ballot layout and get ready for ballot printing. And Section 8 changes the time frame for the Secretary of State to draft a proposed ballot question for a citizen initiative and post it for public comment after we've determined the initiative has enough signatures to go forward. It changes it from the 10th business day after final adjournment of the legislature to the 15th business day after the Secretary of State issues a decision of validity for the petition. And this change, again, like the section before, ensures that we have a final ballot question in time to prepare ballots for printing, especially after a long first session of the legislature. So I'd be happy to answer any questions now or at the work session.
Thank you, Deputy Flynn. Any questions from the committee? Okay, seeing none, look forward to your participation in the work session. I'm sure we'll have plenty of questions by the time that rolls around for sure.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. All right, we'll proceed with the public hearing section now. We'll recognize those speaking for. We will start with Ms. Du Bois again, followed by Ms. Luther. And again, if you could please, as always, state your name, the town you are from, who you're representing, if anybody, and you will have 3 minutes for your remarks. So thank you, Ms. Du Bois, for staying with us, and you are welcome to start when you are ready.
Thank you, Representative Chiazzo, Senator Lucchini, and members of the Veteran and Legal Affairs Committee. Again, my name is Patty Du Bois. I am a member of the Legislative Policy Committee of the Maine Towns and City Clerks Association. We're speaking today in support of LD 1830, but we would offer a few points that Deputy Secretary Flynn eloquently stated. We shared our concerns in advance. So we're happy to be available for questions or to be available for the work session, and we're happy to work with the Secretary of State's office on that legislation. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Boyce. Very, very poignant. Brevity is not lost on this committee, I hope. Any questions for Mr. Boyce? All right, seeing none, thank you for spending your morning with us.
Thank you.
Up next, we have Ms. Luther, and she will be followed by Ms. Sway. So again, Ms. Luther, welcome back.
Thank you.
For the record, state your name, town you're from, who you are representing, if anyone, and you have 3 minutes when you are ready to start.
Good afternoon, Representative Chiazzo, Senator Lucchini, members of the committee. My name is Ann Luther. I'm a resident of Trenton. I'm here today as the volunteer chair of the Advocacy Committee for the League of Women Voters of Maine. We're in support of LD 1830. At least we certainly have no objections to it. I've introduced the League in my prior testimony, and we have no objections to anything in this bill. There are a couple of things that we would mention though. Section 1, allowing tribal ID cards to be acceptable proof of identity in registering to vote. We enthusiastically support this measure, believing that it does reduce barriers to voting for many eligible citizens. Good move. Section 4, permitting the Secretary of State to designate procedures that deviate from statutory requirements for absentee balloting. We had one suggestion, which I think Deputy Flynn has already covered, which is what to do in the case where it's a localized emergency or maybe a local flu outbreak or some reason why one single facility is not safe to enter or is not accepting people to come in. We want to protect both the residents and the election officials and make sure everybody's right to vote is protected when it's not a statewide emergency, but maybe a local health emergency. Section 7 and 8 also, the League does support the constitutional right of Maine people to engage in the citizen initiative process. The way we read these two changes, it's really only to keep the timeline moving and ensure against unnecessary delays. So we think these measures are appropriate and we support them as well. So thank you for the opportunity to testify. You probably won't have any questions, but I'll answer them if you do.
Thank you, Ms. Luther. Any questions from the committee? All right, seeing none, thank you for your time with us this morning and this afternoon. Appreciate your participation. Up next, we have Megan Sway. And welcome back, Ms. Sway. Third time is the charm. As always, please state the name, town, and who you're representing, if anyone. And when you are ready to proceed, I will start the clock.
Good afternoon again, members of the Committee on Veterans and Legal Affairs. My name is Megan Sway. I live in Portland, Maine, and I am the Policy Director at the ACLU of Maine. On behalf of our members, I am here to support LD 1830. In general, we support the bill in its entirety, but I wanted to speak specifically to sections 1 and sections 4. While there's much that's commendable in the bill, we are particularly supportive of clarifying that identification cards issued by federally recognized Indian tribes are acceptable proofs of identity for applicants registering to vote. Indians have been the victim of systematic discrimination, which has included the taking of Indian land, the destruction of Indian ways of life, the denigration of Indian language and culture, the isolation of Indians on reservation, the denial of rights of citizenship, and efforts to remove or exterminate various tribes. The effects of this discrimination continue, and one consequence is a depressed socioeconomic status that limits the ability of tribal members to participate effectively in local, state, and national elections. Although Maine's Constitution granted Native Americans the right to vote in 1819, Utah and Maine were the last 2 states in the country to remove formal barriers to Indians exercising their right to vote. Indians in Maine did not win the right to vote in local and state elections until 1967. Indeed, even after Indians in Maine had the right to vote, they faced voter suppression and were told on occasion to go back to their reservations and to not participate in Maine elections. In order to ensure that Maine's future is more just than its past, this committee must ensure that Indians can elect candidates of their choice to offices in their jurisdictions, and this bill is a small step in that direction. We also support section 4, which unfortunately in my testimony, I labeled as section 2. As we have seen over the past 2 years, people living in congregate care settings are incredibly vulnerable to airborne viruses, leading to lockdowns and restriction of movement for those inside. We support clarifying the laws so that people who are in those facilities can stay safe during states of emergency while still being able to exercise their fundamental right to vote. We also recommend that there be protection for poll workers too, so that everyone is as safe as possible while ensuring democracy continues to function. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Sway. Any questions from the committee? Okay, seeing none, thank you for spending your morning, and same to you as well, for sure. So that concludes those registered to speak. If there are any participants in the attendee room who wish to speak to LD 1830 and have not done so, please raise your virtual hand and we will bring you in and recognize you. And just a reminder for those in the public, if you are trying to log into the Zoom, you will need a passcode, and the passcode number is 120954. Okay, seeing none, then we will conclude the public hearing on LD 1830. And that concludes our list of scheduled public hearings. I will turn it over to Chairman Lucchini to take us out and see if we have other work to accomplish this afternoon.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chair. I do believe that concludes work. Janet, do we have anything else scheduled? Okay. All right, well, thanks everybody. Apologies again for the delay in getting moving. That is it for today. And I think we're not in on Monday because it's holiday. So it's probably Wednesday is the next time that we're gonna convene. So, all right, thanks everyone. Have a great day.
Just a reminder, we're going to shoot for 9 a.m. on Wednesday. Hopefully we'll get the 9 a.m. launch this time, but just make note of that different time change and hopefully Zoom will cooperate. So.
All right, thanks everyone. We'll adjourn the meeting for the day. Thanks.
Thanks folks.